The hospital room smelled like antiseptic and hope, two things that don't usually belong together. I sat there cradling my baby girl against my chest, staring at the door like it might swallow me whole. She was so tiny, her little fist curled up near her face as if she were still holding on to whatever magic had brought her here. Her skin smelled sweet, soft, and new. Everything about her was perfect, but the silence around us? That wasn't. Where is he? I whispered to no one but myself, rocking back and forth in the stiff hospital chair. My voice cracked halfway through the sentence, betraying how hard I was trying not to cry. Not again. Matthew hadn't been gone long, just under an hour, but already, the weight of his absence pressed down on me harder than labor ever could. He'd slipped out after signing some papers, muttering something about needing air. At first, I thought nothing of it. People get overwhelmed during moments like these. I understood that much. Hell, I felt overwhelmed, and this was literally happening inside my body. But when 30 minutes stretched into 45 and then 50, well, dread started creeping in like a thief tiptoeing through shadows. My phone buzzed on the bedside table, snapping me out of my spiraling thoughts. A text from him blinked onto the screen. Liv, I need time. This is too much. Too much? Too much? Anger surged hot and sharp inside me, burning away any patience I might have had left. What the hell does that mean? I muttered aloud, clutching the phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. You think this, I gestured wildly at our sleeping daughter, is optional, but yelling at the phone didn't help. It never did. Instead, I stared at those 8 words over and over until they blurred together, each letter carving itself deeper into my heart. Matthew wasn't coming back tonight, maybe not tomorrow either. And suddenly, all the cracks in our relationship, the ones I'd ignored or patched with blind optimism, came rushing forward like floodwaters breaking through a dam. We'd met 5 years ago at a coffee shop downtown. I was studying for finals, drowning in highlighters and caffeine, while he stood in line ordering what would eventually become his signature drink, a triple-shot espresso with almond milk. His hair was messy then, always sticking up in odd directions like he'd just rolled out of bed, which, knowing him now, he probably had. When he accidentally spilled half his coffee on my textbook, I wanted to kill him, literally. But instead, we ended up talking for hours, about books, music, life, and somehow, despite my initial annoyance, I found myself laughing more than I had in weeks. Back then, Matt was everything I needed. Funny, kind, ambitious. He made grand plans for the future, promising adventures and late-night conversations under the stars. We moved in together within 2 years, got engaged 6 months later, and tied the knot surrounded by friends and family who swore we were soulmates. Everyone said we were destined for greatness, except nobody warned me destiny has a way of twisting itself into knots. Things changed gradually. Little things at first, a missed date here, a forgotten promise there. Then bigger ones, arguments over finances, disagreements about career goals, nights where he came home late without explanation. Each incident chipped away at the foundation of trust, but every time I brought it up, he'd brush it off with apologies and promises to do better. So I stayed. Because love isn't supposed to give up, right? Love fights, love forgives, love holds on even when your hands are trembling. And now, this. By morning, the nurses had stopped pretending not to notice my red-rimmed eyes or the way I flinched whenever someone knocked on the door. They offered sympathetic smiles and murmured platitudes about how fathers sometimes struggle with the transition to parenthood. One older nurse, Carla, even patted my shoulder and said, "He'll come around, sweetheart. Men are just slower to catch up sometimes." Slower to catch up? Was that supposed to comfort me? As if Matthew's abandonment was merely a speed bump, instead of a canyon-sized betrayal? When visiting hours began, my mom showed up first. She took one look at me and burst into tears, which only made me feel worse because crying moms are basically kryptonite. Dad followed close behind, carrying a duffel bag stuffed with clothes and toiletries. Neither of them asked about Matthew directly, though I could see the questions hovering unspoken between them. "He'll be back," Dad said finally, his tone firm but gentle. "People make mistakes, Livy. Give him a chance." A chance? How many chances did he deserve? 3, 5, 10? What number signaled enough was enough? Later that afternoon, Emma arrived, my best friend since high school, and the person most likely to tell me exactly what she thought, whether I liked it or not. She marched into the room like a storm cloud, her curly brown hair bouncing with each step. "Okay, spill it," she demanded, plopping down in the chair next to mine. What happened? So I told her everything. From the argument we'd had the night before delivery, "You're not ready for this," I'd snapped, to the awkward silence afterward, to the damning text message that confirmed my worst fears. Emma listened quietly, her jaw tightening with each word. When I finished, she leaned forward, her green eyes blazing with fury. "That coward," she hissed, "leaving you like this, after everything you've been through? Screw him, Liv. You don't need him." Her words stung, not because they weren't true, but because part of me desperately wanted them to be false. Deep down, I still hoped Matthew would walk through that door, sheepish grin in place, ready to apologize and take responsibility. But another part of me knew better, knew that people rarely change unless forced to. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting golden light across the sterile hospital walls, I held my daughter closer and tried to imagine a future without Matthew. Could I do it alone? Raise her? Teach her? Protect her? Would she grow up resenting him? Or worse, blaming me for his absence? One thing was certain. Whatever path lay ahead, it wouldn't be easy. But sitting there, watching her sleep peacefully, in my arms I realized something else too. I didn't have a choice. This little life depended on me now. And damn it, I wasn't going to let her down. Not today. Not ever. The days that followed blurred together like watercolors left out in the rain. I brought my daughter, Sophia we'd named her, home to an apartment that suddenly felt too big and too quiet all at once. Every creak of the floorboards made me jump. Every ring of the doorbell sent hope surging through my chest, only to be crushed when it wasn't him on the other side. Matthew's absence wasn't just physical, it was a void that echoed everywhere. His coffee mug still sat on the counter where he'd left it, half full and growing moldy because I couldn't bring myself to touch it. His guitar leaned against the wall untouched, gathering dust like a relic from another life. I tried calling him, once, twice, 10 times. Each unanswered call added another brick to the wall between us. Eventually, I stopped picking up the phone, altogether. What was the point? He clearly didn't want to talk, or maybe he didn't know how. Either way, the silence stretched on, heavy and suffocating. Emma came over almost daily, armed with casseroles, laundry detergent, and enough snarky commentary to fill a stand-up routine. She'd sit cross-legged on the couch while I fed Sophia, firing off opinions about Matthew like they were arrows aimed straight at his heart. He's probably holed up somewhere feeling sorry for himself, she said one afternoon, flipping through a parenting magazine she'd picked up at the grocery store. Classic avoidant behavior. You know what his problem is? He thinks being scared gives him permission to bail. Maybe, I muttered, adjusting Sophia's blanket. Or maybe he really isn't ready. Maybe he never will be. She shot me a look sharp enough to cut glass. Don't you dare make excuses for him, Liv. This isn't about readiness. It's about responsibility. And if he can't handle that, then screw him. Seriously. Her words stung, but not because they were wrong. They hurt because they were true. Still, I couldn't shake the nagging thought that maybe, just maybe, I'd failed him somehow. Had I pushed too hard during those last few months of pregnancy? Been too critical? Too demanding? My brain spun circles around itself, replaying arguments and moments of tension until I was dizzy with regret. But Emma wasn't having any of it. Stop blaming yourself, she snapped one evening after catching me staring at Matthew's empty side of the bed. You didn't do anything wrong. You carried that baby for 9 months, gave birth to her, and now you're raising her while he sits on his ass doing God knows what. None of this is your fault. Her voice softened slightly. As she added, you're stronger than you think, Liv. Stronger than both of you combined. I wanted to believe her. I really did. But strength felt like such a foreign concept these days. Most nights, I collapsed into bed exhausted, not just physically, but emotionally drained. Sophia woke up every 2 hours, crying for food or comfort, or simply because she didn't understand why the world outside her cozy womb was so loud and chaotic. And every time she cried, I wondered if she could sense the emptiness beside us, if she knew her father wasn't there. Then there was Mom. Oh, Mom. She showed up unannounced one morning with a basket full of homemade lasagna and a determination to fix things. Her idea of fixing involved sitting me down at the kitchen table and forcing me to talk about Matthew until I either broke down or screamed. Neither option seemed particularly appealing. You have to reach out to him, she insisted, stirring sugar into her tea with enough force to crack the spoon. He's lost, sweetheart. Men like Matthew, they retreat when they're scared. But deep down, he loves you. He loves Sophia. He just needs guidance. Guidance? I repeated, incredulous. Mom, he walked out of the hospital without even holding her. How am I supposed to guide someone who won't even acknowledge their own child? She sighed heavily, setting her cup down with a clink. I'm not saying it'll be easy. I'm saying it's worth trying. For Sophia's sake, if nothing else. Her words lingered long after she left, gnawing at the edges of my resolve. Was she right? Should I try reaching out again? Or was I just setting myself up for more disappointment? A week later, I got my answer, in the form of a letter. Not an email, not a text, but an actual handwritten note slipped under our apartment door. My heart leapt into my throat as I bent down to pick it up, half expecting to see Matthew standing there waiting for me. Instead, the hallway was empty. Back inside, I unfolded the paper with trembling hands. His handwriting was messy, rushed, like he'd written it in a hurry. Liv, I don't know where to start. All I know is that I messed up, big time. Leaving you and Sophia like that, it was selfish and cowardly, and I hate myself for it. But facing you feels impossible right now. Facing us. I need space to figure things out, to decide if I'm capable of being the man you deserve, the father she deserves. Please don't hate me. I'll contact you soon. I promise. Matt B. The time I finished reading, tears were streaming down my face. Relief warred with anger. Hope battled despair. Part of me wanted to rip the letter to shreds and toss it in the trash. Another part wanted to hold on to it like a lifeline. Proof that he hadn't completely given up. Typical Matthew, Emma muttered when I showed her later, always running away instead of dealing with his problems head on. Maybe, I admitted, but at least he wrote something. That has to count for something, right? She rolled her eyes but didn't argue further. Instead, she changed the subject, asking how Sophia was sleeping and whether I'd managed to eat anything resembling a real meal lately. Small talk felt safer than confronting the elephant in the room, even though the elephant refused to leave. As the weeks dragged on, life settled into a fragile rhythm. Feedings became less frantic, diaper changes less chaotic. Sophia grew bigger, stronger, more aware of the world around her. And me? I learned to navigate this strange new existence, one where I was both mother and father, protector and provider. But late at night, when the house was silent except for Sophia's soft breathing, I'd find myself staring at Matthew's letter again, wondering if he meant what he said, wondering if he'd ever come back, and deep down, wondering if I even wanted him to. Months passed, and Matthew's letter remained tucked inside the top drawer of my nightstand, a constant reminder of his absence and the unanswered questions swirling in my mind. Sophia was thriving now, her chubby cheeks dimpling with every gurgle and coo. She'd started recognizing my face, lighting up whenever I walked into the room like I was her entire universe. And maybe I was. Maybe that was enough. But no matter how much joy she brought me, there were moments, quiet, fleeting moments when doubt crept in. What kind of man walks away from his family? Was he truly trying to figure things out, as he claimed, or had he simply decided we weren't worth the effort? The uncertainty gnawed at me, a low-grade ache that never fully went away. Then one crisp autumn morning, the phone rang. I froze mid-step. Sophia balanced on my hip as I reached for the receiver. Caller ID flashed his name and my stomach clenched so hard it felt like someone had punched me. For a second, I considered letting it go to voicemail. But something, curiosity, anger, hope, made me press the button. Hello? Liv? His voice cracked slightly, raw and hesitant. It's me. The sound of him sent a jolt through my chest, equal parts relief and irritation. Relief because hearing his voice meant he was still alive, still thinking about us. Irritation because, well, where do I even start? What do you want, Matthew? I asked, keeping my tone deliberately neutral. Beside me, Sophia babbled happily, completely oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I wanted to see you, to talk. Can we meet somewhere, please? His desperation caught me off guard. This wasn't the same Matthew who'd ghosted me after Sophia's birth, the one who'd left me drowning in uncertainty while he sorted out whatever mess existed in his head. This was someone different, someone broken. Why should I trust you? I shot back, my voice sharp enough to cut steel. You disappeared for months, Matt. Months. Do you have any idea what that was like? Raising her alone? Wondering if you'd ever come back? I know, he said quickly, his words tumbling over each other. And I'm sorry. God, Liv, I'm so sorry. I don't expect forgiveness. I just need a chance to explain. Explain. That word hung between us like a challenge. Did I owe him this? Did Sophia? Or was meeting him only prolonging the inevitable? After a long pause, I sighed. Fine. Tomorrow. Afternoon. The park near the river. But bring coffee. Decaf. The next day, I arrived early, pushing Sophia in her stroller along the winding path lined with golden leaves. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke, and the sun filtered through the trees in dappled patches of light. It was peaceful here, a stark contrast to the chaos brewing inside me. Matthew stood waiting by the bench, looking thinner than I remembered. His hair was longer, unkempt, and dark circles shadowed his eyes. He held 2 paper cups in trembling hands, his gaze fixed nervously on the ground until he saw me approach. Hey, he said softly, offering me one of the coffees. Thanks for coming. I took the cup without responding, settling onto the bench with Sophia nestled securely in my lap. She stared at him curiously, her tiny fingers reaching toward his face. He hesitated before leaning closer, brushing a tentative hand against hers. She's beautiful, he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. Just like you. For a moment, I let myself imagine what it might feel like to forgive him, to rewind time and pretend none of this had happened. But then reality came crashing back, and I shook my head firmly. Don't, I warned. Don't try to charm your way out of this. You owe me more than platitudes. He flinched but nodded, bracing himself like a man preparing for impact. You're right. You deserve better. Both of you do. And then he began to speak, not in excuses or half-truths, but in raw, unfiltered honesty. He told me about the panic attacks that had plagued him during my pregnancy, the overwhelming fear that he'd fail as a father, about the sleepless nights spent staring at the ceiling, paralyzed by doubt, about the shame he'd carried since walking out of the hospital, convinced he'd ruined everything irreparably. It wasn't about you, he insisted, his voice breaking, or Sophia. It was about me, my own insecurities. I thought leaving would give me space to fix myself, but all it did was make me realize how much I screwed up. Tears streamed down his face now, unchecked and unashamed. Part of me wanted to comfort him, to tell him it was okay, that we could work through this together. But another part, the stronger, angrier part, refused to let go of the hurt. So what now? I demanded. You waltzed back into our lives like nothing happened? Like you didn't leave me holding the bag while you figured yourself out? No, he said firmly, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. I'm not asking for redemption. I'm asking for a chance to earn it, to prove I can be the man you trusted me to be. We talked for hours, hashing out everything, his struggles, my pain, the future we might or might not have together. By the end, exhaustion weighed heavily on both of us, but clarity had begun to emerge. Matthew wasn't perfect. He might never be, but he was willing to fight. For us, for Sophia, for the family we'd almost lost. As we parted ways that evening, he kissed Sophia's forehead gently, whispering, "I'll make this right, sweetheart. I promise." Watching him walk away, I realized something important. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing to move forward despite the scars. And maybe, just maybe, that choice could lead us somewhere worth going.